Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, my name is, and this is a space where I talk honestly about spirituality, belief, and the things I once embraced without question. Today's video is a little different and a little personal. This is an X, which reacts episode, where I'm looking at modern spirituality tropes through a critical lens. I'm not here to mock, shame, or attack anyone. I lived this life deeply, sincerely, and passionately for many years. I believed I was awakening, healing, and stepping into hidden truth. What I didn't realize at the time was how much of what I followed was built on illusion, emotional manipulation, and subtle fear. So let's talk about it, honestly, calmly, and with clarity. I want to start by saying this. When you're inside modern spirituality, everything feels profound. Every coincidence is a sign. Every emotion is intuition, and every discomfort is framed as growth. I remember feeling special, chosen, like I had access to truths others couldn't see. And that feeling is powerful. It hooks you. It keeps you watching videos, buying courses, pulling tarot cards, cleansing energy, manifesting outcomes. It feels empowering, but it also quietly replaces critical thinking with spiritual language. Looking back now, I can see how easily vulnerability gets repackaged as enlightenment, and how questioning becomes framed as being unenlightened or low vibration. One of the biggest tropes I want to react to today is the idea that you create your own reality in a literal, absolute sense. I used to believe that every bad thing that happened to me was my fault. My mindset, my frequency, my unresolved trauma manifesting outward. On the surface, this sounds empowering, but underneath, it's deeply harmful. It places unbearable responsibility on people for things they cannot control. Illness, abuse, poverty, loss. These become moral or spiritual failures instead of human experiences. And when you're suffering, instead of receiving compassion, you're told to shift your energy. Another trope I fell into hard was the obsession with signs and synchronicities. Repeating numbers, feathers on the ground, songs on the radio. Everything meant something. I trained my brain to constantly search for meaning, and that constant scanning kept me anxious and hyper vigilant. Instead of being present, I was always interpreting. Was this a warning, a confirmation, a test from the universe? It feels magical at first, but over time it erodes your trust in reality. You stop making decisions based on logic or values and start outsourcing your agency to random patterns that your brain is very good at creating. Then there's the aesthetic spirituality, the candles, crystals, moon water, altars, and rituals that look beautiful on camera. I loved this part. It made spirituality feel tangible and artistic. But what I didn't realize is how much the aesthetic masked the emptiness underneath. When the ritual itself becomes the point, it stops being about transformation and starts being about consumption. Buy this crystal, burn this herb, do this spell, and if it doesn't work, you must have done it wrong or you weren't aligned enough. The system never fails. You do. Another major trope is the demonization of skepticism. I remember being told that doubt was ego, logic was limitation, and questioning was fear-based. That framing is incredibly dangerous. It isolates you from grounded perspectives and makes you distrust anyone who challenges your beliefs. Friends who raised concerns became negative. Family members who worried were sleep. And slowly, your world narrows until everyone around you speaks the same spiritual language. That's not awakening. That's an echo chamber. And I didn't see it until I stepped outside of it. Let's talk about shadow work, because this one deserves its own moment. Shadow work is often presented as deep psychological healing, but in practice, it's frequently unregulated self-therapy without safeguards. I dug into trauma without support, convinced that experiencing pain was necessary for growth. There were no boundaries, no timelines, no sense of safety, just endless introspection. And when it became overwhelming, the answer was always more shadow work, not rest, not help, not grounding. Just dig deeper. That's not healing. That's self-erasure disguised as bravery. Another trope that kept me stuck was the obsession with spiritual identity. Being a witch, an empath, a starseed. It became who I was. When beliefs turn into identity, they become nearly impossible to question. If you challenge the belief, it feels like you're attacking the self. That's why people react so defensively. I know because I did. I couldn't imagine who I was without my spiritual labels. They gave me purpose, community, and meaning. Walking away felt like death. But it was actually the beginning of clarity. There's also the constant emphasis on feminine and masculine energies framed as cosmic law. At first, it feels validating, especially for women who feel disconnected from themselves, but it often reinforces rigid stereotypes under the guise of spirituality. Submission becomes divine feminine, emotional suppression becomes divine masculine. Real human complexity gets flattened into spiritual roles. And if you don't fit neatly into those roles, you're told you're unbalanced or wounded. It's a spiritualized version of the same boxes we're supposedly trying to escape. One of the most seductive tropes is the promise of secret knowledge, the idea that you've uncovered truths hidden from the masses, that religions, science, and institutions are all lies, and you've finally seen behind the curtain. That feeling is intoxicating, but it also breeds paranoia. Everyone outside the belief system becomes suspect. Facts become optional, and personal experience becomes the highest authority, even when it contradicts reality. I confused emotional intensity with truth for a long time, and it led me further away from stability, not closer to it. I also want to talk about manifestation culture, especially how it intersects with capitalism. So much of modern spirituality is monetized desperation. Courses promise abundance. Coaches sell alignment. Gurus brand themselves as proof that belief equals success. But the failures are invisible. The people who tried, believed, and still struggled are blamed for not doing it right. I internalized that blame. When my life wasn't improving, I assumed I was broken. That belief did more damage than any external hardship ever did. Another trope is the glorification of isolation. Cutting people off is framed as protecting your energy. Being alone becomes proof of spiritual elevation. And while boundaries are healthy, isolation isn't. I mistook loneliness for enlightenment. I pushed away people who grounded me because they didn't speak my spiritual language. And in doing so, I lost real connection. Spirituality should expand your capacity for relationship, not shrink it. That realization hit me hard when I finally stepped away. There's also the constant narrative of spiritual warfare. Entities, energies, psychic attacks, karmic bonds. Living in that worldview keeps you in a state of low-grade fear. I was always cleansing, protecting, shielding. My nervous system was exhausted. I didn't realize how much anxiety I was spiritualizing until I stopped framing normal stress as metaphysical danger. Peace didn't come from better protection rituals. It came from letting go of the belief that I was under constant threat. What finally broke the spell for me wasn't one big moment. It was exhaustion. I was tired of interpreting, cleansing, manifesting, healing, aligning. Tired of feeling responsible for everything that went wrong. Tired of chasing a version of myself that was always just out of reach. When I stopped practicing, I expected chaos. Instead, I found quiet. And in that quiet, I could finally hear my own thoughts again. I want to be clear, I'm not saying everyone who engages in spirituality is delusional or malicious. Most people are searching for meaning, healing, and control in a world that feels unstable. I understand that deeply, but intention doesn't erase impact. And these tropes, when unexamined, can cause real harm. They can trap people in cycles of guilt, fear, and self-blame while promising liberation. As I began rebuilding my worldview, I had to relearn how to trust evidence, relationships, and myself without mystical filters. That was terrifying at first. There was no universe to reassure me, no signs to follow, just choices and consequences. But there was also relief. I could be human again, confused, imperfect, learning. I didn't have to be enlightened. I just had to be honest. Another thing I had to confront was grief. Grief for the version of myself that believed so wholeheartedly. I wasn't stupid or weak. I was hopeful. And acknowledging that helped me let go without resentment. Leaving spirituality wasn't betrayal, it was growth. And growth sometimes means admitting that something once meaningful no longer serves you. If you're watching this and feeling uncomfortable, I want you to pause and breathe. Discomfort doesn't mean I'm attacking you. It means something inside you is being touched. You don't have to abandon anything today. You don't have to agree with me. Just notice how ideas make you feel and whether those feelings are rooted in peace or pressure. One of the most freeing realizations I had was that meaning doesn't have to be cosmic to be real. Love, creativity, kindness, curiosity. These things matter even without spiritual framing. I no longer need to believe I'm guided by forces beyond myself to care deeply about life. In fact, accepting its fragility made it more precious. As an ex-witch, I don't see my past as a mistake. It was a chapter. But I refuse to romanticize it. I believe growth requires honesty, not nostalgia. And reacting to these tropes isn't about superiority. It's about reflection, about asking whether belief systems actually help us live fuller lives or just distract us from reality. This channel exists because I wish someone had spoken to me this way years ago, calmly, thoughtfully, without fear tactics or ridicule. If you're questioning, you're not broken. If you're staying, you're not foolish. What matters is that you're thinking, feeling, and choosing with awareness. So, as we wrap this first part, I want to thank you for staying with me through this conversation. In part 2, I'll go even deeper into spiritual influences, toxic positivity, and what rebuilding a grounded identity actually looks like after leaving belief systems like this behind. If this resonated with you, take a moment to sit with it. And I'll see you in the next part. Stepping away from spirituality forced me to confront something uncomfortable: how much authority I had given to spiritual influencers. These figures present themselves as enlightened guides, speaking with certainty about truth, healing, and reality itself. I trusted them because they sounded confident and aligned. But confidence isn't wisdom, and authority without accountability is dangerous. When someone claims spiritual elevation, disagreement gets framed as ignorance instead of a valid question. Toxic positivity is another trope that quietly causes harm. I was taught that focusing on negativity attracts negativity, so I learned to suppress real emotions. Grief, anger, confusion, all of it had to be reframed into gratitude or lessons. That didn't make me peaceful. It made me disconnected from myself. Honest emotions aren't spiritual failures. They're human signals, and ignoring them doesn't make them disappear. One belief that deeply confused me was the idea that suffering is always chosen at a soul level. Trauma, loss, hardship, everything was framed as something my soul agreed to for growth. That belief removed compassion from pain. It made suffering feel deserved or necessary instead of something that simply required care. Pain doesn't need cosmic justification to matter. Sometimes things hurt because they hurt, and that's enough. Spiritual bypassing was something I didn't recognize until I left. I used spiritual language to avoid practical action. Instead of setting boundaries, I sent energy. Instead of addressing problems, I trusted the universe. It felt peaceful, but it kept me passive. Growth doesn't come from floating above reality. It comes from engaging with it, even when it's uncomfortable. Another trope is the belief that spirituality makes you morally superior. I didn't think I was judging others, but I was. I believed I was more aware, more evolved. Letting go of spirituality humbled me in ways belief never did. I stopped needing to be special and started valuing being honest. That shift changed how I relate to people more than any ritual ever did. Fear is also embedded deeply in modern spirituality. Fear of being asleep, misaligned, attacked energetically, or karmically punished. I lived in a low grade state of anxiety, constantly cleansing and protecting. When I stopped believing in spiritual threats, the fear faded. Peace didn't come from better protection. It came from realizing I was never under attack to begin with. Rebuilding identity after spirituality was one of the hardest things I've ever done. Without cosmic purpose assigned to me, I had to decide what mattered. At first, that felt empty, but slowly it became grounding. Meaning chosen is quieter than meaning assigned, but it's far more stable. I also had to accept uncertainty. Spirituality promised answers for everything. Letting go meant admitting that not everything has meaning or explanation. Surprisingly, that made life feel lighter. I no longer had to decode reality. I could just live in it. Living didn't make me bitter or empty. It made me present. I don't hate my past. I understand it. I was searching, and that matters. Growth doesn't require shame. It requires clarity. If you're watching this and questioning your beliefs, you're not broken. And if you're staying, do it consciously. Truth doesn't fear examination. Thank you for being here, and I'll see you in the next video.